Let's do it.
Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, we get to close the book on the NFL draft from a betting standpoint today. I'm about done. I've allocated about all the capital I'm prepared to lose on Thursday at this point. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I've gotten deep down into the second round, third round, fourth round kind of guys, and I'm pretty close to ready to put a pin in this. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a horse race this weekend.
Yeah, I know.
The lead is getting buried because the first round is fun, and there's some props we have in the second round, and it's interesting if you have a fan. If you're a fan of a team, you like to see I think that was a good move. We need some depth at linebacker in the second, third day, but outside of betting and maybe having some fandom, the second and third days aren't that fun. They drag on. It seems like one of those. The cancer telethon that's on for 30 hours a day, the old one, the Eagles one that used to be on forever. It's just the draft is on all day long, and I'm not watching any of it. So I'm moving on to horse racing once we come to the weekend.
It's the first Saturday in May this weekend, which means we got the Derby, the Oaks on Friday, and we got to get our prep on. So it's time to close the book on the draft. And to help us do that, we welcome my colleague from NBC Sports Edge, none other than the great Thor Nystrom. Thor has not been a guest on the Deep Dive to this point in his career, and that is a shame on me. That's a shame on me. We should have brought him on to profile college football many seasons. He is a very experienced college football pro bettor. He knows these guys. He knows these players. He knows their strengths and weaknesses, forwards and backwards. And so to help us move past, who's the third pick going to be? To help us kind of move the narrative along to, okay, what can we actually expect of some of these guys in terms of their ability to produce as pros? He joins us today. Welcome for the first time as a guest of the Deep Dive, Mr. Thor Nystrom.
Thank you, Mr. Dinzik. That was very nice. It's a pleasure to join you this evening.
All right. Well, can you give the folks a little bit of a background? Yeah, can you give us a little bit of your background? I see all these college football helmets behind you. I assume that's your first love, college football.
That's right. Yeah, and the NFL draft, and I don't know if I would say in conjunction, but it's always been those two things. I'd be scribbling out mock drafts when I was a little kid and stuff like that. I remember Randy Moss's So, by the way, you guys started with some fighting words at the open there. I was a little bit off balance. You're you said I could swear. I asked you beforehand, but you guys were talking shit about the NFL draft. I'm here, guys. You're who would sit there for 30 hours and with everything? I'm
I feel seen.
I'm right here. I'm literally right here. I fucking watched the replays. Yesterday when I was, doing my shit or I had up the, whatever it was that was on the NFL Network, the 2014, whatever. I get excited about it, and then I could make fun of McShay and stuff like that, as it's going on. And it's just a good time. I love the draft.
This is the part where the Vikings forgot to put their pick in.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
There's some classic moments. Remember the Laramie Tunsil one?
Oh,
Laramie Tunsil, that one will forever be a Mount Rushmore NFL draft moment.
We talked about that, just chatting on the side a bit with good friend Dr. Eric Eager there the other day. We said that
my boy.
We said what
another
if,
Minnesotan, by the way.
Yeah, another Minnesotan. We said what if there was Twitter during the Randy Moss draft? All those teams, because how much shit do you have to see every year with the Bears could have drafted these quarterbacks. They do that every year constantly, especially when the teams play each other. We just didn't get to experience that with the Cowboys passing on them everybody basically passing on, your Hall of Fame sure thing hit. It was beautiful. That was the most fun I ever had, obviously, until until late in January. That wasn't not nearly as fun as a young man being a Vikings fan, but like that,
That's right.
the fact that it hit, like, he's like, oh, we took a kid. He has some character issues, a bit of a problem, but he's really good. And then obviously super fun season. But yeah, like that would have been like Twitter fun all year long. And it sucks that we didn't have that back then.
Yeah, it's, thinking back then, like Randy Moss, they considered him to have like horrible character issues. Like it was I forget, it was Dick Vermeil or Jimmy Johnson or one of the famous coaches. There's like a famous quote from him where he, is basically like, I wouldn't touch Randy Moss. I would prefer, and it was like some 5th round receiver. He's like, I don't want guys like that on my team. But there were some people in the NFL that felt that way. He'd gotten kicked off of 2 teams, and there were circumstances to look into there, as far as his thing went. But like he was like he was like the Kyle Pitts of receivers, like at that time, like I watched him at Marshall, like, again, when I was a kid, you're just giggling, like it was ridiculous, unlike anything you'd ever seen before. And so, to get back to my story, I remember everything about that day. I had to go to John Strauss's birthday party, and I say had to because it was on the day of the NFL draft. I asked my parents if I could not go, and they made me go. And so like the other guys were playing like Mario Kart in another room, and I stuck away to try to find another TV in the house. It's like an unfamiliar house to me. Like I'm looking
There's
around.
Gotta be another TV with the draft on.
There's the china on the wall and whatnot. I'm like, where's the TV? Where's the cable box? But anyway, that was a fun day. And, with the Randy Moss thing, it was like, if you got past Dallas that year, Dallas was sitting like 8, 9, 10, 11, like somewhere in there. But if you got past them, there was this long window of teams that there was no way they were going to take them. They didn't need a receiver or whatever. There was only like 2 teams in between Dallas and the Vikings that, could even ostensibly consider taking him. And so like when he got past Dallas, I was like, yes, other people at John Strauss's birthday parties, like, this kid's a freak.
Can you name 3 players that were drafted before him?
For sure.
Okay, so the
the two
couple quarterbacks and
two NFC
before him.
2 NFC North teams picked right before.
Was it Vonnie Holiday? One of them?
Vonnie Holiday, yes.
And the
defensive end, Green Bay Packers took Vonnie Holiday.
Dallas, the kid Dallas took, I believe, was a defensive end from UNC, right?
It was Greg Ellis. My God,
Jesus Christ!
You just named 2 defensive ends from 1998's North Carolina Tar Heels.
I was just going to go with the first 2. I was going to go with the 2 quarterbacks in Woodson.
That 10-pick window, like in my childhood, it was like, the first time you see like a naked body, like a naked female, it was like, oh my God, for that hour, of those times, like I was riveted. Right. And he indeed fell to us, and was every bit, what advertised. Right.
Yeah, of course. Did you
head to Mankato that summer?
I didn't get to Mankato that summer.
I got his autograph on a pennant that year.
Did you really?
He still he wandered up to the crowd after we went to the scrimmage game down at Blakesley, and he had like 15 hats on, just ball caps, like stacked them on each other, and he's kind of signing them and throwing them out to people and stuff. Yeah, and then I had a pennant that my dad had bought because I was like 7th grade, and I didn't have any damn money. And I got a signature from him. He was wearing like 18 still. He didn't even have his 84 yet because it was still training camp. And Christ, he was skinny. It was weird.
This was like a great draft too. You had 4 Hall of Famers: Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, Alan Faneca, and Randy Moss.
And that was the Ryan Leaf, Peyton Manning.
Peyton Manning year.
The huge debate. By the way, that year, as a kid, I have to say this. I have to admit this. I preferred Ryan Leaf. I was like, what are those idiot cults doing? Like, you have to take Ryan Leaf there.
Of course. Well, the NFC North was shaped in a lot of ways by this draft. The Bears picked 5th. They took Curtis Enos, running back out of Penn State.
Penn State. Yeah.
Packers, we mentioned, took Vonnie Holiday, defensive end. Then the Lions, right before they took Randy Moss, right before the Minnesota took Randy Moss, picked Terry Fair, cornerback from Tennessee.
A blast from the past.
That was back when you could take a Big Ten running back and feel really good about it, though.
And it's when no one batted an eye when you took like a running back that rated a 4.62 in the top 5. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, he's a workhorse.
He's a bruiser."
Yeah,
that's wild, man. Wild. All right, well, first draft I really remember was the and God, again, one that would have absolutely broken Twitter was the year that Mario Williams went over Reggie Bush, went over Vince Young, and DeBrickshaw Ferguson, and Matt Leinart went 7th. And oh man, those guys were all
like
super
2 weeks
super.
before.
That was the first draft that I remember being like, this is appointment television. Like, you know, you're going to sit down and watch this round 1 all day. And that was when it was on Saturday mornings too. So, but yeah, that was super fun.
That was definitely a memorable one. And both of those guys did turn out like you wanted it to. So like in hindsight, it's, you know, it's weird, but like, that was a juiced up night for sure.
Okay. So then help me if you have the historical chops, if you have the story, you know, if you're the expert what am I stumped? NFL draft.
Is this going to turn into Stump the Schwab?
No.
Oh,
this isn't trivia.
Maybe we could.
No. Just say like the 1998 draft was obviously a 10 out of 10. Like 4 Hall of Famers in round 1, like Hall of Fame, you know, maybe the greatest quarterback aside from his playoff performances of all time, and you know, all time cornerback, wide receiver, blah blah blah. If that was a 10 out of 10, if the Reggie Bush year was a 10 out of 10, like what is this year? Are we kind of we're above 5? We're above 5 out of 10, right? Like there's a couple all pros in this class on top of 5 true blue starting quarterbacks.
It's an 8.5.
So you're talking class quality as opposed to
class quality.
Experience. Okay,
yeah, class quality.
Yeah, I think it's I don't think it's like a great class overall. But what I do think is it was what you were just mentioning, right? Like I think there's 4 stud quarterback prospects that back Jones, and then and then you got Chase, Sewell, and Pitts. Those guys aren't just the best guys in their position group in this class. If you stretched it back, X number of years for each of those, they still would be right. And with Pitts, you got to go back a long way, whether it's Tony Gonzalez or whether it's Vernon Davis, right? Because there's no one else that's analogous, between then and now.
Wow.
Yeah. And so like you have those, unicorns or those, studs, outside the quarterbacks. But where I think it's like lacking is like, once you get beyond, like the top 14 or so, let me say this. So there was a story a day or two ago about how a bunch of teams were trying to trade down, and like they were talking about like, oh, it's a flooded market because literally everyone's trying to get down. And whatever every team was trying to do, this story was saying was get into this, in the second round to early third round kind of area. Yeah. And I totally agree with that. This class is very, very top heavy, and then after that, once you get beyond those, unicorny type guys or the stud quarterback guys, it's a discrepancy thing. It becomes about taste,
Sure.
And this goes with the class itself too, which is extremely unique. The most valuable piece of information that prospects give to the NFL during this job application process, the pre-draft process, is their final year of film. This season, in this draft process, we have less final season of film on the prospects than ever before, and it is not particularly close. Like in past ones where you'd be talking about a first round guy that played 8 games, that's like, oh, that's not a lot, but this year there's a lot of guys that was 0. Remember back in the day when it used to be super vaunted to not play a season and then come back, like Maurice Clarett or Mike Williams, and now it's a decent portion of the guys that are going to take into the first 3 rounds, whether it's that or whether it was 1 game in the case of Trey Lance. Rondale Moore played 3. Yeah. All these guys, on a lot of them, you have to go back to 2019, and then you have to decide: is he as good as he was then without having played a season? Is he better? Because
Mike
the last time I saw him, he
wasn't
20 years old. Yeah. So this year it presents this unique puzzle that, that we've never seen before. And I think, what it is like when you have, you've seen a guy, 4 years starting or whatever, and you have all the data on him. It's like when you're at the eye doctor and you can see, clearly, and then they start switching the lenses and it gets more blurry. Like some of these prospects in this, Trey Lance, only 16 starts in the FCS. He may end up being, I comp him to Steve McNair. Certainly that is his ceiling, or maybe even a little bit above that. He also has this enormous risk profile. But no one knows exactly what he's going to turn out to be. We've only had 16 FCS games with him, right? So like we don't know how he's going to react under, when the bullets are firing, all this sort of stuff. Like, is he going to play up? Is he going to play down? Is his accuracy and his placement ever going to, improve? He only did it for 1 year. He was only a starter for 1 year there. And that season, 28 to 0 TDI and T ratio, explosive through the air. It's like almost 12 yards a pass, ran for, I believe, over 1,000 yards that year. And of course, NDSU, just stampeded to the national title. But we didn't see him a lot after, we only saw one game in the fall. And there's a lot of cases like that in this class.
I love the word unicorny that you threw in there at the beginning of that.
That's a great term.
I think you should probably look into patent law and getting that under your umbrella.
Sure.
But and then also, you talk about the drop off. I think a big part of the drop off is, I guess, and we can get your opinion on the defensive side of the ball here too. But like Surtain, Horn, maybe if people are on the Parsons train, but otherwise like the edge rushers, the D linemen, the rest of the linebackers, the rest of the defensive backs, like there's not like a secondary piece that's really, really popping. And I think teams are also kind of figuring out too, like, hey, guess what? It's not great to draft a cornerback super high because they don't make immediate impacts in the NFL. And I think defense in general is becoming, it's a little de-incentivized to draft defense high just with the rule changes in the NFL. But I mean, you got me thinking about a couple things about the defensive side. I want to hear your take on that. But yeah, the Lance thing too, it's just wild, like how teams can talk themselves into this off. I mean, a couple of pro days where the guy's out there, I mean, he's ripping the ball 65 yards in shorts. He looks great. But again, like he should be playing spring ball. And I mean, my Jackrabbits are the recipient of that. They probably would not be favored to win the title if Lance was playing spring ball, but here we are. And yeah, he didn't even look great in that one game. I mean, they put that game together correct me if I'm wrong. They put that game together just to get him like a game in the fall to put, get some people to take a look at him because they felt bad. And then he didn't even look that great in that game. It was it wasn't even a very good game to watch.
Because the only interception he had in his career.
Yeah.
Was thrown in that game.
So yeah, it makes me think about like, if people were scared off by, oh man, we took, and it's hard with, Mitch because he's had such a maligned career and a lot of critics, but the Mitch thing, like, oh, he didn't have enough starts and maybe teams shouldn't be chasing after somebody that only had this many starts. And that was in a Power 5 conference. Like I would be scared about taking the guy. And I mean, there's still talk about him at 3.
When I heard Mitch out of your accent, I immediately thought Leidner. Like it took me like several beats to. He's not talking about Mitch Leidner's.
He didn't get drafted.
Gophers career. No, I thought you were talking about his Gophers career. I was like,
God,
nice. We're gonna get a soliloquy about Mitch Leidner's career. That is like, dumbass. He's not talking about Mitch Leidner. He's talking about Trubisky.
We can do a whole Gophers section. We got to talk about.
We can talk about Demery Croft. We can talk about all the guys.
Oh my God! But to be fair, we were a running back factory for a while.
That's true.
Maroney,
Lawrence
baby.
Maroney.
Yeah.
But more to that point though, a guy like Lance who needs development, and me from an outsider standpoint, and maybe this is my blindness because I can't really evaluate college players especially well in terms of talent. I always kind of assume like talent's only really 50-50. It's only really half of it. You got to go to a system that develops you and develops you well. And, presumably Lance, let's assume, I've written off Fields 3, which is tough to swallow because I feel like he's pretty clearly the second best quarterback in this class. So I'm taking the losses on that. But what's done is done. I got 60 cents on the dollar for all the bets I placed, and I'm moving on. But if Lance goes to a system like Shanahan, is that a fit in your opinion?
I think so. Yeah. Shanahan's going to put him in a lot of favorable situations early. I think, assuming that happens, you're going to see a lot of the play action, a lot of the bootlegs. You're going to see some of the RPO. And it's some of the stuff that you saw at NDSU. I mean, they ran a pro style system at NDSU. It's one of the reasons that, Wentz had a quick transition over, and Easton Stick, the guy in between the two, of course, he got drafted as well. So, I think again, like putting him into advantageous situations, using his his mobility. And then the only real nitpick I got with the kid is like he's not super duper accurate. But I even hesitate to say that because the implication is that he is inaccurate, which is not the case. And in conjunction with that, he never puts the ball in danger. He has this very unique sort of on-field. He ups your efficiency to this big degree. He ups your explosion to a big degree because it's both running and passing, right? Like his average yards per rush was like over 8, right? And then and then with 0 interceptions, and it wasn't just 0 interceptions during that season, played 14, 15 games. PFF charted him with only 4 turnover worthy throws. So like sometimes you'll see a guy with a low interception number, but then it's like, oh yeah, but there's 12 dropped interceptions or something. That wasn't the case with him. And so he manages to be both efficient and explosive while never putting the ball in harm's way. I mean, just that itself. And then when you realize like his arm strength is probably just south of Trevor Lawrence for number 2 in this class. And then he's just an athletic freak, right? I mean, he's a really, really big kid and well built. When he came out of Marshall, a part of the reason that we won't get into his whole recruiting story, but it's actually really interesting. PJ Fleck basically just 86'd his entire recruiting process because PJ Fleck didn't offer him. And I've actually talked with a Rivals guy about when they toggled down like Lance's rating or whatever, and it was like, well, and he was explaining it to me like, well, PJ decided not to offer him, and he was the guy that was closest to him, and so it wasn't just us that started to look at him differently. Other programs did too, because it's like what PJ that year gave a scholarship to a guy named Vic Veramontes who didn't even make fall camp. He transferred right after spring, and he went to UNLV to be a linebacker. And then the other one is Zach Nexted. You don't need to remember that, Dave. You're not going to hear it again. That's who they gave scholarships to at quarterback. They gave out 2, and they refused to give one to Trey Lance. He visited the camp, wanted to go there, went to all their camps. But anyway, a part of the reason was, well, there's another part, but I won't get into that. But the other one, he was very raw, of course, but he was also, just in terms of his frame, was like a string bean, and he basically used his redshirt season behind Easton Stick, like just going, beast mode in the weight room essentially.
Oh wow. Well,
what class is Marshall? Are they 3A?
They're pretty low.
I think it's maybe even 2A. That's the thing. Like it's a decent sized town for that part of the state, but like that was never a big school. I wonder if that. I mean, but still, like it's not like other quarterbacks from smaller schools hasn't thrived. That's weird. I remember you tweeting about that too, and it's like, I mean, that sucked for him because it's a really interesting part about the whole recruiting, the recruiting trail. Like if one coach who is supposed to have offered you, even just like a token offering, like, yeah, we'll offer him because he's in state and whatever. And like, he doesn't, like, it just raises red flags. And so I'm like, kind of F the guy.
Exactly. And you see the opposite thing. Like, for instance, there's been numerous situations like this over the years, but like Minnesota will offer a kid, in like his junior year. And then, a couple weeks later, he'll get an offer from like Notre Dame or Alabama or whatever. You immediately see his recruiting ranking go up because then they're like, oh, it's not just, a local kid that the Gophers think they can't get any better, but it's like now the big boys are coming in. So you see like the 3 stars jump to the 4s and like stuff like that. And then the opposite happens when there's only one sort of, FBS coach in the area. That was the situation for him, right? I mean, if he went the other way, he was in the Dakotas, right? They don't play, they don't play FBS football in the Dakotas. So, and Fleck went the other way. The recruiting rank, dropped him, in kind, and he didn't get a look. From any other school outside of Boise State was the one FBS offer that he got, but he stayed loyal to NDSU.
It sounded like from Shanahan's presser today, like whoever they pick third, he's starting.
If the world exists.
What do you say?
He basically is like, we're going up. We went up to 3 to get our starter for next year. That was more paraphrasing, but that was basically what he said. Do you think Lance can make the adjustment in 1 year, or is he more of a project?
I don't see any reason why you would throw him to the wolves, especially when one of the sneaky scenarios where I would, if I wasn't concerned about like long-term, the kid picking up bad habits essentially. But like, if they had their first round pick next year, it would matter, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
Then they can go 3-13, whatever, 4-12. But the fact that they don't, if you take Trey Lance and you start him immediately, and I love Trey Lance, but he didn't play football last year. Okay, the year before that he had the awesome season, of course, but the season before that he was a red shirt, and then the season before that he was the 3-star recruit that no one was looking at. And so he's been off 2 of the the last 3 years, and then also the thing of he's the least experienced first round prospect that we've ever seen at the quarterback position. I would start him on the bench if it was me. Try to build him up.
Let's talk about some of these unicorns.
Yeah.
Let's get into the unicorneration of the draft. You're number 2 on the big board after Trevor Lawrence, number 1, which no one really disagrees with. And I've made some bets on the Jaguars to win the AFC South because I believe in Trevor Lawrence. But number 2 on your big board is Kyle Pitts. And that comp that you gave to Tony Gonzalez is an eye-opener, I have to say. What about Pitts really sets him apart from the other tight end prospects we've seen in the last 20 years? Because
quick follow-up tag along with that. Like, was Trask just kind of shitty and he just threw the ball up and Pitts would just make a lot of plays? Like,
that's a fair question.
Tony
was making plays on the ground.
Yeah, would he
Pitts
been
is
even
making plays
better
in the
with
air,
a good
like
quarterback?
Hot garbage.
Yeah. Yes.
Fair.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and he certainly helped out Kadarius Toney too, a guy that can't make catches when people are around him. Kyle Pitts gives space to everyone. It's like played with LeBron.
Oh, wow. Well, I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, what is it about him? It's just literally his ability to go up and get the ball and his size advantage on top of speed. It's just the physical gifts are too much to overcome.
Yeah, and this will speak also to the how hard it was for me to make that comp. What he is as a receiver. If you took out if you just made him a receiver, right? You just playing him on the boundary. It's like 95% of Megatron, like in literally every single thing except wingspan. He got a bigger wingspan, and his hands now are getting really close. He didn't drop a ball last year. And he was in a lot of hard situations. They set him downfield a whole lot to catch those Kyle Trask ducks. with 2 defenders, the people in the SEC, they ain't letting Kyle Pitts go one-on-one. Now he was winning a bunch of jump balls downfield, and sometimes he just ran by the dude, and it wasn't a jump ball at all. It's like again, it's just south of Megatron. What you're getting there from the athletic profile. The frame is the exact same, except Kyle Pitts has a little bit longer arms, and the downfield ball skills in particular is what terrifies the defense, and that's what starts the spacing thing. You just naturally have to play a player like that different. We talked a little bit about this with like Henry Ruggs, but that was sort of apocryphal. It's just the speed thing. Then it tilts the defense, whatever. But like Kyle Pitts is a guy like that actually does that. And he also is going to change the way like the defensive personnel. You can get the defense to tip stuff depending on where Kyle Pitts is in the formation, right? Because then sometimes they're going to have to bring up the safety who is their their hybrid guy on the team or whatever to take the slot, and the defense can become a little bit more predictable having Kyle Pitts as well. So there's also things that flower off of it. But again, Megatron light as just a receiver, and then as a tight, like as an inline blocker before last season, he sucked. Like they shouldn't have put him in blocking situations at all. He was just a matador. But it was like between 2019 and 2020, like when the rest of the world was like freaking out about COVID, like he was working his ass off. He had 2 big weaknesses, or I shouldn't say big weak. They weren't things that were going to nullify an NFL future, but the 2 weak spots on his profile was too many concentration drops. His hands are absolutely fabulous, but the year before he had like 5-6 balls that he shouldn't have flubbed, right? Like he was looking somewhere else, or he let a ball eat him up when there's just absolutely no reason for that. So he drops these couple balls, and then the other thing was the blocking. Well, then he comes in this season, and on all these throws at all these targets he didn't drop one catchable target, and then his blocking went from objectively shitty to slightly above average for an SEC starting tight end, which in this case is a seismic leap forward.
Yeah, right.
Are there landing spots where he just won't be as effective though? Out of his, his landing, I think his landing window is pretty small at this point. Like, is there just, if you were going to say as a fan of Mr. Pitts, is there somewhere you don't want to see him land in that 3-4 team window that you think he just wouldn't be utilized as well? And whether it's the offense, the offensive coordinator, the scheme, because I want to see him to continue to do that stuff. I want to see him do it with an NFL quarterback.
Well, the nightmare scenario would be he somehow falls to 7, and then Detroit would happily take him, because then it's like, oh, we got Megatron again. Oh my God. Yeah. Like, that would be like the Vikings with Moss, even though they didn't completely know it at the moment, but the Lions would. It'd be like, oh my God, Megatron is descended from the heavens. We've been wandering the desert for so long, and all of a sudden the Banana Cubs. But of course that would be the worst case scenario for Kyle Pitts. And the teams in front of him, I think they're all good scenarios for him. Like Atlanta, he would get to play with Matt Ryan. Certainly, I was about to say Julio Jones, but there was that bizarre rumor this morning that Atlanta might be shopping Julio Jones, and then I was like, well, if that's the case, like what led to that, right? Like, why are they shopping him now? Are they planning to take a receiver or a receiver?
Yeah, they're in some kind of cap hell.
Exactly. But yeah, the other situation are good for, playing with Matt Ryan, playing with Joe Burrow, perhaps the best deep ball thrower in college football history. If it's just a 1-year sample size, he would dominate with him. And then with Tua, he'd be great with Tua too. Tua needs a receiver that can do stuff in the intermediate area, and Pitts will open up, everything else. Like, I hate it when people rip on Tua, who he shouldn't have been playing last year because of the health. And then that receiver core, it's not only dog shit, but it's like dog shit in the way that doesn't work with Tua. Like Tua, you can't put the jump ballers with Tua. Miami's got a bunch of these shitty jump ballers, and it's like, that's not his game. Like, watch him at Alabama. You get him the zippy receivers. The thing he's best at is hitting guys on the hand when they're in full stride, when it's got to be right there, so then they can just keep, going full bore. He was fabulous at that, and I think that's when he started the Steve Young comps and stuff like that. Lane Kiffin, I believe, actually was the first guy that made that comp when he went out to scout him in Hawaii as a high schooler. But the accuracy and then the scrambling, being able to buy time. So he would help all those teams, and the Lions would be the worst case scenario for everybody.
For almost any player being drafted by the Lions would be the worst case scenario.
Like Jeffrey Okudah wasn't even, that good as a rookie. The season before, he was just wiping people out. It was like, it's like every guy that goes there, it's like, what the fuck's going on there?
Yeah. Well, at least they got the coaching figured out. So
I want to bring back Wayne Fonts. Right?
Do they?
Like my childhood, like the Herbert Board, Johnny Morton,
Mel Gray returning kicks.
Scott Mitchell.
Mel Gray was the most confusing football card I got when I was little. I remember getting that, and it said ST, and I had to go to my dad and be like, "What is this position? Is this guy's like?" He's like, "I think it's just special teams because that's all he does."
Yep.
I'm like, "Oh shit, I guess." So, did you want to go with the quarterback next? Because I
want to talk about Chase. Let's stick with our unicorns, man.
Okay.
Jamar Chase. You have Jamar Chase comp to Roddy White. That feels like a little bit of it's a little bit of a low ceiling for Chase, at least from all the glowing that I've heard.
Roddy White was a magnificent wide receiver.
I mean, the last time I remember seeing Jamar Chase, he was on the same field with Justin Jefferson, who is out of this world good, and Jamar Chase was better. So why exactly, are we thinking like all pro is his ceiling? And I guess why, or do we get the sense that teams like Miami are so high on him, they're willing to trade back up into, to the 6 range and give up all these future assets just for the shot at a guy like Chase?
For sure. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, whether it's Chase or being guaranteed one of those 2 other guys, Sewell being the other one, being at 6, knowing how many quarterbacks were going to go, for sure, that was a part of it. And yeah, I mean, your point's well taken about Chase at LSU. I don't think that Roddy White's a derisive comp at all. He was a fabulous player, and if he played on better teams, it would have been even more. What I see similar about those guys is it's the explosive north-south thing where they could take the top off whatever they want. But then the ability to make plays down the field, even in traffic, even in contested situations, coming down with the ball and then, making plays downfield. But then in the intermediate area, you're going to get some stuff too. Chase is a guy who's really hard to break down after the catch and stuff like that. But like, I just don't think that it's a derisive, comp. I try to be, I try not to go like, hyperbolic with them too much.
Of course. Yeah,
like for instance, the big one with, Devonta Smith this year is Marvin Harrison, and I comped him to Keenan McCardell, which I think is like if he has Keenan McCardell's career or a little bit above it, like it's a fabulous career, right? Or the Roddy White career.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but I see I saw some similarities there with that jetpack where it's just boom, and the acceleration, creating, more separation as he goes downfield because of the acceleration. And then he's going to bring the ball down, they're guys that have similar dimensions. And so, yeah, I mean, when the cornerback has to respect the fact that you can take him over the top all the time, especially when he's like a, well-built, guy with strength coming off the line, like Chase and Roddy White both were, it opens up other stuff for you in the intermediate area. And Jamar Chase is a lot better athlete than he was given credit. Like, he started to get nitpicked, like sort of like Bateman did. It's like, oh, he's a good athlete, but he's not a great athlete. But no, he actually is a great athlete. Like his RAS was 98th percentile size adjusted going back, in his position group to 1987.
So that's back to like Al Toon days. Jeepers.
That's right.
Yeah, we're talking way back. So the chat's kind of agreeing here. They think Chase 5. I think just as a fan of football, that's what I want to see too. Like just the narrative behind that.
Same.
Like I want to see the band get back together in Cincinnati, get him a receiver. Like it still sucks that your offensive line's not any good, but maybe another year of continuity there. It's not complete horse shit. So I would like to see that.
They'll get another talented guy in the top of the second round. I would guess.
I think they'll definitely be drafting for some O-line as they go further down the draft.
So as far as the comp goes, then Roddy White, 10-year pro, only one first team All Pro. That I guess that is seems reasonable. It's fair. It's 4 Pro Bowls, 1 All Pro, good career.
Dinzik, as you know, it's like comps aren't like one size fits all for like every, like sometimes you have to go stylistic and get it in the ballpark of the career projection, or you know what I mean?
For sure.
It's a median.
Yeah, it's just like a totem, right? You're trying to put in someone's, and I don't want to make it unrealistic. His ability to win downfield at that size as consistently as he did in 2019, that's about as dominant a season as you're going to see. Devonta Smith and his 2019, those seasons are like, if you go back like 5, 6, 7, 8 years, those would be on the top. Like what he did was ridiculous, and like you mentioned before, he was playing outside of Justin Jefferson, and he won Jamar Chase won the Biletnikoff that year.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. No, this is, I want to have the right perspective on these guys as we start to rate them and put them into, synthesize them into, power rating these NFL teams. And I think this is a good, kind of good vetting of all of this. And I love your comps in general. So this is fantastic.
I think people get weird with comps too. Like, like you just did. And honestly, I did too when you said some of these names. It's like, and you got to remember, these are like 20-year-old kids that we've never seen play against the big boys.
Oh, sure.
And, we're very excited that they're top 5, top 10 picks. But again, not if you comped everybody to, some Hall of Famer, they can't all be Hall of Famers. Just not how it works. So yeah, there is a little, it's a good, I think it's a good way to temper expectations. And then when you take a step back, like Drew did, and be like, oh, fuck, that's not a bad career.
Oh, it's good. 10 years in the NFL is good. Any All Pro is good. Like that's that's a very, reasonable expectation. And if the Dolphins gave up the assets they gave up to go from 12 to 6 to get a guy like that, then I can chill out a little bit, because my gut is, hey, you guys blew it making that trade up. I think, or I worry at least, that they're going to be holding the bag on. They didn't intend to give up all those assets to go up and get the best tackle in the draft, but they may be there if the Bengals take Chase at 5. I guess if you are, it's pretty clear in your mind, at least, you take the best player available. That's Sewell. Future All-Pro tackle. That's Sewell. Smith is, a little bit tier lower in terms of quality and expectation of what you can get out of him at the pro level. And plus, if you take Sewell at 6, the Dolphins have another pick later in round 1. they can come back and get an Elijah Moore or a Minnesota's Bateman. I mean, they'll be able to get a productive receiver later in round 1 if they so choose. I guess what is the kind of the bull case for Penei Sewell being a top 6 pick?
He's the best. So I've been doing this for 5 years now. He's the best offensive lineman that I've evaluated. Quentin Nelson was also very, very good. But just because the position,
he plays guard, yeah,
exactly. I give it to Sua. He's just dominant. Like he's like a I think of him like he's like this giant industrial spring that back at every single time the ball is snapped, he just comes forward with this just ludicrous force that he shoots out with. He gets low and the power like right off the snap. He's got the control at least. In that split second there, he's just so dominant. He's so hard to deal with because you don't see human beings that are that big that move forward that explosively. Just like that. Fabulous play, pass protection, very, very good. Very few hiccups there at all. Over his. He was a limited player. As well. You got to give the caveat with a lot of guys. Penei was a opt out or whatever. So we saw him for 2 years, and he was. I mean, right from the start. As a true freshman in the Pac-12, he was. If not the best tackle in the Pac-12, he was one of two. And then last season, in 2019, his last season, he was the best offensive lineman in college football. He actually broke the PFF record for highest graded season of an offensive lineman. Wow. Interestingly, was beaten this year by Brady Christensen, Zach Wilson's blindside protector.
Well, he's like 30.
Well, yeah, his kids are proud of him.
Anyway, I'm not
just being sarcastic. I'm being sarcastic. But to go back to your point on Sewell in 2019, that last year's offensive tackle class was stacked. It was stacked. Thomas
5 deep, baby.
Thomas good. Wirf's amazing.
Wirf's a man.
Andrew Thomas, the guy, a man
Wills,
whose name I remember.
Good. I mean, those guys will be. Cornerstones of good offensive line for a decade.
But by the way, isn't it funny that we make fun of Gettleman for fetishizing offensive line play? He most certainly does. It's almost kind of creepy. But he had the first pick of those 4 guys, and we'll see. But looks like he
picked the first
one. Yeah. It's like Gettleman, you got to go first. This is your effing thing, man.
We thought for sure
what exactly do you do around
everyone
here?
I talked to last year that knew Wirfs was the best.
He fucked up my mock. I had Wirfs, I think.
I think I did too. Although I think I had Thomas 20-1 first OL. So I wasn't super sad. I guess would Penei Sewell have been taken OT1 last year?
Oh, for sure. Easy.
Wow.
Easy. That's like Dave Gettleman's wet dream is being in the position to take Penei Sewell. Well, it's almost too bad it didn't happen for him.
Okay.
Would you change the order of the receivers around? You just got me thinking about like people popping off the line. If we played by, I've had CFL on the brain. If they could run forward before the play.
Oh yeah.
If you could have momentum at the snap.
I would like to see that. I miss CFL at this point, but I'm thinking more about Bateman at this point. I really want to see him succeed.
Well, but we don't want to change because part of Bateman's special sauce is no press corner can stop him off the line. Like the former basketball player, like his footwork is awesome off the line, so you can't press him. He'll get by you real quick, and then his route running is just fabulous, and then the ball skills are. It might be the most fucking ridiculous ball skills in the class. Like if you put his top 10 catches in college and then you looked at the past 10 receiver classes, he might legitimately be number 1. Like he had some catches that it's like, wait, how the fuck did that just happen? Your Jackrabbits, by the way, he was, I believe, his sickest catch when he was running down the sideline and he caught a ball with one hand. They just, snatched it out of the air and kept running into the end zone. Like it was ridiculous.
We almost lost that game. Yeah, we almost lose every time we play South Dakota State. It is wild somehow.
Yeah. If
anyway,
Rashad Bateman did play that game,
Rashad Bateman. Yeah, we'll get to Rashad Bateman. We'll find a home for Rashad Bateman, I suppose.
Go back to Utah. Just a quick question on him. We talked about the offensive lineman down there. It's consensus now.
Thor is QB4.
That's where my question was. The consensus, he's the consensus number 2. The mocks, the betting odds are very heavily favored for him going to. the reason you have him ranked where you have him ranked, I want to get to, and I want to hear from you. But also, I guess in my mind, it's almost like the Trey Lance thing, where it's not FCS, but it's certainly not the SEC. It wasn't the the level of company. Like, how much can you take, or how much weighting do you do when you're looking at stuff based on like, well, here's his raw skill and here's what he did, but also he was playing a horseshit defense from Boise State or something.
Yeah,
and no disrespect to Boise. Boise was good.
With regards to Zach Wilson's, he's got a really interesting one where the people that disagree on him, it's like there's like this one fault line, like in his evaluation, and like you're either on one side of it or the other, but it's the exact same. You're just parsing one thing differently, and that basically sends the herds on their way. With Zach Wilson, Zach Wilson was solid as a true freshman. Not great. He wasn't Trevor Lawrence, who won a national title and was the only 90 plus PFF true freshman quarterback ever. But Zach Wilson was more like 80, like something like that. His same season, he debuted. But as a sophomore, he really struggled. BYU played a hard schedule that year, especially in September. They had a gauntlet. And then the other thing I'll say in his defense was, and you'll hear this a lot from his supporter, that he was injured. He played through two injuries that season, but he didn't play. He played worse as a sophomore than he had as a true freshman. And then this year, a lot of people, not just in the football world, around the world, of course, COVID really screwed things up for a lot of people. It really helped Zach Wilson. BYU had a much harder schedule coming into 2020 before COVID wrecked it. COVID wasn't good to the independents and the FBS because then all their schedule went away, and then the big conferences just wanted to play each other. Right. And so BYU could only pick up the pieces, last second with this schedule. There's just a procession of fucking shit cans, like their SP plus schedule strength at the end of the year was 89th. BYU's was, and that's even a bit misleading as far as who Zach Wilson played. Like in the bowl game, he played UCF, which otherwise would have been something like the third best defense he played that season. They were like 67th SP plus defense, fourth best defense out of schedule, whatever. But in that game, a couple guys that you guys might be familiar with, Richie Grant and Aaron Robinson, they're two studs in the secondary. They opted out. They had numerous opt-outs on for UCF that game. So Zach Wilson was basically playing their backups. So let me give you. I put this out on Twitter, but a couple years ago when Drew Lock came out, I was anti Drew Lock from the jump. Back in his junior year, people were like, "Oh, he's going to be what?" And I was like, "He's not a first round pick." And how I saw it with him was, he obviously played in the SEC, at Missouri. They had a couple seasons where they had a really bad non-con, and then there was one year they caught the SEC schedule right, so they got the underbelly. And it was like, the Vanderbilt and Tennessee was down, and they didn't play a very good schedule. But what I noticed with Locke when I would watch him is whenever he was playing a good team, whenever Missouri's playing a good, when they're playing Alabama, Auburn, LSU, teams like that, he stunk. It stunk. It wasn't just that, it was like, oh, his teammates are being overwhelmed. It was that he was actually playing down. It was like the human embodiment of when you're playing NCAA football, the screen shaking and the controller shaking, because it's like, the home field advantage, you're supposed to be freaked out or whatever. That's sort of how I felt about Drew Lock. He also played worse under pressure, et cetera. But I put him under this criteria a couple years ago where I wanted to parse his stats against, good opponents and bad opponents to sort of illustrate. And there was just this absurd discrepancy between him playing, well, anyway, I did the exact same thing with Zach Wilson. I put him under the same parameters. And so I'll tell you guys what I found. So Zach Wilson versus Power 5 non-bowl teams. So Power 5 teams that did not make a bowl this season, he played them, and Group of 5 teams that finished with under 9 wins. He went 17-2 with a 70.6 completion percentage and a 49-6 TDI&T ratio. Decent. When he played Power 5 bowl teams and Group of 5 teams that finished with 9 or more wins over the same span, 2-8, 62.8% completions, and get this, 7-9 TDI&T ratio. He threw more interceptions and touchdowns in those games. So his yards per attempt dropped 3. Between the two samples, it went from 10.3 to 7.3. His touchdown percentage went down 7.2%. It went from 9.5 to 2.2, and then his interceptions jumped from 1.2 to 2.9. It wasn't quite as bad as Drew Lock. but it was pretty dang close. It's like the closest that I've seen, just screwing around with that. And by the way, some people will be like, oh, that happens with everyone when you play better teams, and it's like, no, it actually doesn't, and so I had to do it with Pat Mahomes at Texas Tech to show people he had the exact same stats against the shitty teams that he did against the good ones, when you parsed it out by the rate. In fact, he actually played a little bit better against the good ones. So like you tend to find with great quarterbacks, they find a fucking way,
Yeah. So
this is perfect for the Jets then.
Yeah. It sounds like a guy that could beat the hell out of the Jets.
Especially if Darnold turns into a stud under Joe Brady, who was the guy that leveled up Burrow. Like there's a shot of that. Like what if he turns his career around, it turns into a stud, and Zach Wilson turns into Drew Lock combined with Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah. I mean, it seems, but truthfully, the AFC East is the perfect home for him. He gets to play the Jets twice. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah. At least the Bills are still bad. And Miami doesn't have any high picks this year. Yeah, geez. It could be rough.
Belichick defense twice here.
I'm kind of cheering. I'm kind of cheering for the guy, but I mean, you have. I'm glad you kind of backed up, like what I just thought from my gut with zero empirical evidence on a very low level theory. I like that you did the math and all the legwork.
You tend to find that the Zach Wilson supporters, when you bring up 2019, they'll be like, well, yeah, but he was hurt. He's playing through injuries. And, also there's Joe Burrow, there are quarterbacks that jump up like that. And then, but they'll never reference the strength of schedule thing. It's so funny, like, it's just like, oh, he just became Joe Burrow. But it's like, what about the context of the season before when he was playing a top 15 schedule and he was not good at all, and what about that when we parse the numbers where it's like because in the Septembers is when he'd be playing like a Washington, a Utah, different teams like that, and he just never did it. And this year they didn't face those teams, right? And so it goes back to that thing I was talking about with the blurry thing at the optometrist or whatever. Like he's blurry there, and the people that love him, they feel assured about it, like they are seeing a clear picture.
Well, Mormon Mahomes is a really catchy nickname, so I get it.
I do like that a lot, though.
All right, that's really good info. I appreciate it. I appreciate you explaining that because I saw your tweet and I liked it, and I was hopeful that we would get to that point here. You still comped him to Baker Mayfield, though, not Drew Lock.
Yeah, I did. And this is going back to we could talk about comps for hours. Like I don't even think I mentioned like the finishing up with the Kyle Pitts one was like I was at first I was like, should I just comp him to Megatron? But then I was like, he's not quite Megatron. He's also a different position, so some people could get confused. And then I was like, everyone else is comping him to Darren Waller, and it's like, well, okay, because he'd be the closest in the NFL right now. But the issue is Kyle Pitts is going to be better than that guy as a rookie. So how am I going to comp him to somebody who's immediately better than?
Dude, do not draft Waller if you're in fantasy football this year, by the way.
There was a very small amount of people that
Raiders offense is going to suck.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, and just finishing up on the Wilson thing, like initially during the start of the thing, I comped him to Tony Romo because when I watched him play, it's like if everything comes together. What's that?
The golfer?
Tony Romo.
Yeah, no, I had him in a golf DFS lineup this weekend.
His high points remind me a lot of that, but that's the bonanza comp, right? And then the bust comp is Drew Lock. He will be Drew Lock if he does.
That's the 84th and the 16th percentile of the distribution.
Exactly.
50th percentile is Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield. That's exactly right.
It could work.
That's exactly right.
Okay, that's cool. At this point, I need to ask about two players that what you think about them and their potential impacts, who kind of are at the tail end of this range of really potentially meaningful contributors this year. And they just happen to be the two players that I now have the most at stake that they get picked early by a lot.
Should I tailor my comments
No. My rationale.
Don't tell me what side you're on. So
my rationale for these is nothing to do with their potential comp. It's legitimately just where the way the draft is structured, where they're likely to go. I have big underexposure right now on Slater and JC Horn. Let's talk about Slater first. Pretty clear OT2 by everyone who does a big board. I love the comp to Teron Armstead. That seems completely reasonable to me. Guy is going to be able to make meaningful contributions this year to your team. A lot of smoke sending him to Carolina, which again, if Joe Brady can turn Sam Darnold into something meaningful, he's going to need some protection. Slater's the guy that you can start year one. Are you? I guess. Do you understand why some people like Daniel Jeremiah and others would have put Slater over Sewell as OT1?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But I will say I love Slater. Like I like him a lot. And it's not just like, the movement, the athleticism, everything like that. He proved the concept that Elijah Vera Tucker did not. Elijah Vera Tucker is a guard. Rashawn Slater is going to be a tackle in the NFL. We saw him shut down a procession of future NFL edge rushers in the Big Ten. The lower end of that was like the Kenny Willekes's, shut them all down. And then he got to Chase Young, and he gave Chase Young more problems than anyone did in college. That's the difference between, we were talking about the quarterbacks, you could sort of spot things that there with tackles that, where the length is the issue. Slater's arms are 33 inches with, his length is basically NFL average for guard. And so, you have concerns that some guys are just going to be too athletic for him, the length plus the athleticism. It'll be something that, he can't overcome or whatever. But, he's shown it against the freakiest of the freaks with Chase Young. He proved the concept. Whereas Elijah Vera Tucker, he had a great season this season, his first 4 or 5 regular season games, however many USC played. But then they ran into Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, and a guy named Kayvon Thibodeau, we're going to be talking about him next year. He's going to go very high. And he just absolutely destroyed Elijah Vera Tucker. Like, put him in a fucking body bag. And it's like, he can't play tackle. It was like, that's it. Okay.
I like that new nugget about Elijah Vera Tucker too. That's cool. Okay. So, all right. Well, I feel a little bit better.
Yeah. And the horn thing was something we've all kind of agreed on between you, me.
Well, the horn thing is, I don't think there's not consensus, in my opinion, across the teams that need cornerbacks, which is everyone.
No.
And particularly those cluster of teams in 10, 11, 12, 13 range, I could see cornerbacks go in that range. And I don't think there's really consensus across boards that Surtain is better than Horn. Horn is better than Surtain. So I think there's a reasonable chance that there's a little bit of a, we've heard rumors like Arizona has been making moves to try to, maneuver into place to take Horn. The LA Chargers would be a hard floor for Horn at 13. I guess what's your read on these two CBs that are at the top of the board right now between Surtain and JC Horn?
Yeah, so my only disagreement there is, for me, Surtain's the best defender in the class. I do see a little bit of not huge, and it's mostly acknowledging the risk factor because Horn is not a complete guy yet. It was like I think the way I was describing it was like when you watch Patrick Surtain play, it's like watching like Eric Clapton unplugged like at a concert. Everyone's like chilled out. He's because he's always under control. He's like one of those Malcolm Gladwell motherfuckers that did it 10,000 times because his dad, obviously played the NFL, sort of like Antoine Winfield was talking about with his dad, where he'd like watch film with him, like as a kid in bed, like Antoine Senior would, after practice would have his laptop open. Yeah. And I think a very similar thing happened with Surtain. And not only that, Patrick Surtain Senior now is one of the country's best high school coaches. He actually won the high school coach of the year last year in Florida. Wow. Not only did his team have Surtain a couple of years, his son, of course, but it also had Tyson Campbell from this. Wow. Like they put people, in FBS programs, but he had that, and then he got to Nick Saban and the grandmaster and his coterie of overqualified analysts and whatever position Alabama can put these guys in so they can pay them a bunch of money, but they don't count against their on field shit. Like it's fucking crazy. We got to get a salary cap in college football. It's Alabama's got the cheat code on lock because they got as much money as they want. So let's hire all these former ex-coaches to be analysts. But anyway, like that was the PhD program that Patrick Surtain studied in after he had the best, pre-college education that you could possibly have for a guy like that. And you see it when he plays, everything is very quiet and very deliberate. And the receiver does what he fucking wants him to do right from the start, right off, the line. He's funneling you to the sideline. He's taking away options from you, right? There's less space there. You're going to start to telegraph in your next couple steps, where you're going to be going. And then he knows where you're going. Like he'll run the route for you. It's pretty wild. Like his special sauce of getting on someone immediately with his length, and then the footwork, in between there, but funneling him to the sideline and just taking away his options from there. It's like he knows what's going to happen next.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's a really fabulous player. Whereas JC Horn, it's like The example I use is like when I was at high school. I don't go to many concerts. I actually don't like concerts. I'd rather listen on a CD or whatever. But anyway, I went to this Aerosmith concert because a friend had a ticket, and the act before him. Do you guys remember Andrew WK?
Oh yeah,
Where it was like
we want fun.
Exactly. Where it was like the headbanging music. It was like like we were. I think it was
a weird opener.
But it was like that energy of like everyone's like like let's watch it. That's sort of the way that JC Horn plays a quarterback. He's like plugged into a socket. He's like he's a little yapper out there, and he very physical. He's gonna have to learn in the NFL to be less physical after 5 yards because he does not allow a lot of separation. But even he's very close, and he a little bit of bump and a little bit of grabby. Those are things you're gonna have to watch out for. But the athletic profile obviously is ridiculous, and the ball skills, right? Like you're starting to see that. And what you saw with him was he started for 3 years as well. Obviously, it was more raw coming in than Surtain was. You saw a significant level up with him. Each season, he had further to come. Going forward, whereas Surtain was, immediately was good. And the last couple of seasons, he had by far the most snaps of any, cornerback in the nation, defensive snaps. And then in terms of press coverage snaps, he had like something like 300, 400 more snaps than the next highest guy over the last couple of years. He's experiencing whatever the NFL needs him to do. So just in response to like the Surtain against Horn thing, I see it as a very similar ceilings for both those guys, but I just see less risk with Surtain.
I like it. I get it.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing too that we've run into with like all throughout this process. We've listened to some pretty smart people do some pretty good breakdowns about why player A is better than player B, and you've got me I got the willies now about Horn, but I guess a lot of the exposure we have on Horn is under 13.5, which was.
Because I've heard the Chargers, he will not get by the Chargers.
Yeah, there's even before we heard that, we liked that one quite a bit. It moved out. I bet that at like minus 130, 2 weeks ago, and it's continued to move out. And that's the thing, like we run into this every year where it's like, you're probably right. We can go down the road. We can clip this up, play it 3 years from now when Surtain is a better player in the NFL, and somebody could still take Horn first because these NFL teams do stupid shit all the time.
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's a matter of preference.
Sometimes it is.
Thor was saying off the top, it's a lot of beyond the guys who are bona fide, these are going to be all pros. A lot of it comes down to preference. And Dan Quinn has a certain type of cornerback he wants to coach in Dallas. He's going to take Surtain or he's going to take Horn. Similarly, Philly is absolutely in the cornerback market at 12, and like I said, the Chargers at 13 as well.
I was just going to say, you guys are locked in, as far as the under 13.5, if Atlanta trades with Denver. Like if they announce that during the thing, it's over. Because Atlanta, I believe, would do that to take Surtain. But they'd piss off Dallas, and Dallas is going to take Horn right after that.
Got it.
Yeah, that's 13.5 is a good number because you get quite a few bites at the apple, but that's one where it would just be done.
Yeah, I like that. I like that breakdown. Last question for you, and then we'll wrap up. This has been a ton of fun. We haven't talked about Jalen Waddle, really. We have only kind of talked about Devontae Smith a little. Do you have, I guess, situation again, opportunity is going to dictate a ton. But of these two guys, better potential pro, if you had to make a bet on it today?
Devontae. Yeah, just like, he doesn't have the, that high octane speed, and so you sort of get seduced by that. And, I do think the Waddle is better than Ruggs, like he, better route running and stuff like that. But he's a guy that has a few special sauce things. He's a very tough kid and all this stuff and going to be an explosive player. But Devonta he's that next tier above where, he was a guy that I mentioned I struggled comping him because it almost, became like, well, is it Marvin Harrison or is it going to be Keenan McCardell? You don't see many guys that play that way. And by the way, to that point, we always talk about, when you hear the Devonta thing, when you hear them talk about his body, it's always as a negative thing, right? Like, too slight and there's not a lot of receivers that dimensions. There are some ways in some scenarios where it really helps him. He is deceivingly long. Like if you look at him just standing on the sidelines, his hands like go past his kneecap.
He does look weird.
He looks weird.
Yeah. He does look, yes. It's just really weird with these just crazy long arms, but he's super duper skinny. So he doesn't
he's
look
built like a
much.
monster. Yeah.
Yeah, but like in where this comes, where this starts to manifest is like in situation downfield or in contested situations where you do not think that he has the catch radius that he does, but he also if he gets even a finger on it, Devonta Smith's coming down with that ball. It's like his catch radius is like a Venus flytrap. Both Tua and Mac Jones found that out. And so like all the different things he does, he's such a smart player as well. Competing really hard, stuff like that. Ball skills are great. You guys know all about the route running and all that sort of stuff. So just as far as a guy that I know is going to go to mini Pro Bowls, I go with him. But yeah, Waddle, it's a different proposition. And by the way, you're talking about like fits and stuff like that. It seems like the best odds right now is that Waddle will get to the Eagles. Because like if for instance Carolina or whatever takes Devonta, but that's going to be a really weird fit. Not in that he gets to beat up with Tua again and do the crosser thing and stuff like that, but that it completely nullifies your first round pick from the year before. And I don't know if Philly's talking about that yet, but you talk about a superfluous skill set. Rager is just if you want to be derisive about it, a poor man's Waddle. And so at that point, you might as well trade him for whatever you can get for him, right? So that's what's interesting about it. I think Devonta would be a much better fit for Philadelphia. And, you do see in some mocks, like for instance, Detroit, we're going to take Waddle, in some of these different mocks. So I think that's what the Eagles are hoping that Waddle goes ahead of them. And Detroit it would be a play to make a decision like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
It sounds like from everything you've described, like Waddle's the ideal wide receiver for Detroit to take.
That was going
that
to be a joke question. Was be like same question, except Smith is drafted by Philly. Because they just ruin receivers somehow. And while I was thinking about him too, I found my Smith comp. That guy. He reminds me of that guy with his arms just going wild because they are just freakishly long, especially when he's not in action, when he's on the sideline, he's just standing there.
Yeah, you can see it. It's like his knuckles are dragging on the ground. Yeah. And again, it sneaks up on people, right? And every inch of it matters because again, he catches everything that he gets a hand on, everything. Mm-hmm. So having that deceiving length, it's something that like in the play itself, it sneaks up on the court, just like his like the athletic package. He's a good athlete, not a bad athlete, but like the smoothness with his routes, the precision of the footwork, the way he sets people up. I wish that I had film, all 22 film of the last 3 years at Alabama practice. You had the PhD on the one side and in Sertan every day going up against one of the great craftsmen that we've seen in college football the last 10 years. There's a reason that he gets the Marvin Harrison thing. There wasn't anyone smoother than that motherfucker, and it's the same with Devonta Smith.
I love it.
It just reminds me of that game he played. When he came back and like Twitter was just breaking, like it couldn't make up its mind between, the entire feed was like, oh my God, get him out of there. He shouldn't be playing. And then like the next 3 messages, like, holy shit, did you see that play? Cause he was not healthy. He was not even close to healthy. And he was still making a mockery of some of those defenders. He was just always open. It was eye opening.
Yeah. Well, it's the footwork in conjunction with him he's always 2 steps ahead of you, right? So it's like this chess game that's going on. Yeah. You don't got a chance against that kid.
Hot garb. Okay, wait. One final question to send you out here. If there's a guy outside the top 15 who has eye-popping, surprising year 1 contribution, it doesn't even have to be a first rounder. Guy who goes in the second round, just a guy that stands out to you as like, for whatever reason, I'm way higher on this guy than the pros, and he is going to be a surprisingly important piece of some championship contending team. Who's your guy?
Bateman would have been who I tossed at a receiver, but I think I have even a better answer for running back, and we already touched on Bateman. Javonte Williams. I've been number 1, or he's been my RB1 since the jump, since my very first, whatever. And that was back when for everyone it was like Najee and Etienne, and then drop, and then Javonte. And now you've started to see things go the other way. Like Javonte is, you would say, rising, but I always found that a weird sort of, descriptor for something that's just like people finally got to watch his tape or whatever. Like I was just watching it live. That's the only reason I get it early on people, because for my job I have to watch all the college football games. I'd be doing it anyway, even if they didn't pay me. Don't tell them that. Especially you, Dinzik. I know that you talked to my boss. Don't you tell him. But TJ Hawkins, it was some of these guys you just see, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's I'm lucky to be in the position that I'm in as far as that stuff goes.
Cool. Well, very good. I'll look out for where he gets slotted. That's exciting to. Oh
yeah, and just what I was going to say was Daniel Jeremiah reported. I don't know if you guys saw this, but this was like 3 weeks ago. That it was like he don't be surprised if he's the first guy. And one other thing I was going to mention is take it for what it's worth. I know a lot of people gamblers are listening to the show. Everyone knows about the Najee Harris to Pittsburgh thing. And that's. But I heard an interesting thing this week. I was doing the Pat Mayo live mock show with a guy named Ray Garvin, if you're familiar with him. And Ray played college football, and he's got some contacts in the football world. And he told me that, or he told everyone, I suppose, because it was being broadcast, but he said that he had a little birdie in the Buccaneers organization that told him that if Javonte Williams is there when the Bucs are on the clock, they will take him. I think Javonte Williams is a first round back. He's the only, round one grade that I give out on a running back, and he would make a ton of sense for that team. Also makes a ton of sense for Buffalo. Buffalo took two running backs that were similar to him, but they were just further back on the evolutionary continuum. Devin Singletary, who they took 2 years ago, that season he led the FBS in broken tackles. The next season they took Zach Moss, who did that season. Javonte Williams this past season shattered all the PFF records for most broken tackles per attempt. And then, of course, just in the limited games he played, in terms of last season, he was so far, above and away the leader in that thing. So we know that the Buffalo brass likes backs like that. And again, he is the furthest line of the polarity. They've been, dealing with, it's like multiplicity, when everyone is like one less or whatever. They've been dealing with the ones a little bit down the line. They can just go right to the source was it Michael Keaton? That was
Michael Multiplicity. Yes,
they go right to the original Michael Keaton with Javonte Williams. That's my new comp for Javonte is Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton.
I like it, man. All right, well, that was fantastic.
Great
information. Yeah. Outstanding conversation. Appreciate all of this nuggets.
What pick is Tampa?
32. Right?
32.
I'm honestly, when I put my numbers together this season, I'm going to use your comps to come up with kind of starting grades for what I'm expecting these guys to contribute, from a contribution standpoint this year. I think
I'm sure we'll talk about these guys a lot, Dinzik.
Yeah. Very, very cool.
Yep. Good to be with you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, this was fun.
You guys ready to wrap?
It was.
I think
Perfect
so.
I
liked it, especially
it was awesome. Yeah.
And Christ, it looks like Tampa's just going to win another one with Mr. Mom.
Done. Tom Brady, man.
Tom Brady back again. So, All right. Well, we're done. We're calling it. This is tap the gavel. We're done with the draft. This is it. We'll do some horse racing.
No, the draft's just starting. Draft week just started.
Our content.
If someone's listening, don't listen to those guys. The fun is only just beginning.
Oh, great segue. If you're not done with draft content, where can people find your stuff?
People find your draft content, Thor?
That was smooth as shit. I don't know why NBC isn't giving me that, the handlers to teach me that kind of shit. No one's taught me professional transitions like that, Tinzik. I bet, I've been waiting for 10 years. But anyway, so, okay, NBC Sports Edge, you can go there, NFL draft section. I had my, the 500, which was referenced a couple times here, dropped it a couple days ago. And then I think it was yesterday, I dropped my position rankings, which are specifically relevant for me for when it gets into the UDFAs, because I go like 500s, whatever, but like I went to like 650 with the comps, and so anyway, like when those guys are coming, most people obviously don't have a frame of reference for the guys that are being signed or how good they are. Every single year I rank the UDFA classes because you get value out of that. Last year when after the Jacksonville one, I say James Robinson is this year's Philip Lindsay. You can spot some of these things. The guys that the father, whatever. But anyway, I consider that the second draft, and in my position rankings, I go like 650 deep. So if you don't check it out in advance of this Saturday night, when the draft ends and it goes into the UDFA process, remember to check it out then, because you'll be able to see who your team signed after the draft.
I love it, man. Well, we appreciate you. I can't wait to read it. Check out Thor's stuff at Thor KU on Twitter, and NBC Sports Edge. This is fantastic. Good work. Man. Enjoy the draft. I know it's the weekend you probably look forward to most of the year.
Cherish this weekend.
That doesn't have college football actually being played.
There's college football this weekend.
That's a good point. Yeah,
playoffs.
Good point. Yeah. All right. Well, best of luck, and thanks again for all your time, and really enjoy your content. So take care, and we'll be back to talk to you about college football once college football season rolls around.
Goddamn right.
You can bet as the safest bet you can make on the whole pod. I can guarantee you that one.
Can't wait.
All right. Take care.
We should get him a mini helmet.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think I have a list of the ones he doesn't have still from when I watched.
I bet he doesn't have UTEP.
He's got a lot of the cool ones, like a bunch of the really cool ones that I wanted to get. He already had them, so I'll get the list out though.
That's I'm not even gonna say this on the air. I'm not gonna stop you.